Citizens of the universe, welcome to Neutral Lens Podcast episode 10. Another week is in the rearview mirror, and with it, we have some new topics to discuss. So let's get into it. And as always, if you guys have any questions you want answered, topics you want discussed, at Neutral Lens Pod on all socials, I'll get to in a future episode. So last week in episode 9, actually, it said something towards the end of the episode. I said something to the effect of maybe listen to your haters a little bit. And I just want to clarify that I didn't mean you should listen to people when they say you suck. It just means that, like, if someone's criticizing you, saying that you're boring as a content creator, for example, that maybe you should just self-reflect, see if you are boring. And if you do agree that maybe you are, go find some changes. And if you don't think so, then just ignore it. That's what I meant. But yeah, so anyway, let's go to the first topic, which is a sort of a family like blow up situation where we had this college student. It's a dude. He's about 19, 20 years old. He went to his aunt and uncle's house for Thanksgiving dinner with his parents, and their family gets along really well with this other family, but there were some disagreements. Not going to get into specifics. Basically, over some religion stuff, led to a complete falling out between the families. They aren't even speaking to each other anymore. They usually get on fine. Or like the parents are no longer speaking to each other. The cousins, the kids don't care, right? But he wants the families to make it up with one another and get back on the same page. And he's wondering what he should do. So the thing is, people can be extremely passionate about things, right? Especially when it comes to like religion, politics, things like that. Like, people can get super, super passionate about it. And the more passionate that you are on a certain topic, the more emotional you get, the more emotionally attached you are. And when you have some disagreements when it comes to that, like, the more people care, the harder the blow up's going to be. And it usually results in more anger, more things being said that maybe, you shouldn't have said, because again, you're more angry, and the falling out can be greater. So, that's why you see, like, oftentimes the biggest fights happen in relationships, because that's when you're so emotionally invested, versus, like a business setting where, you shouldn't be yelling anyway, but people aren't as emotionally invested in it. Maybe they are, because it's like, they're all their life's work, but it tends to be a little bit less super emotional crying, yelling compared to, relationships. So yeah, I mean, like, with that being said, time heals most wounds. Like, you may not need to do anything. I think that if you're willing to just wait and see what happens, they might, like, it, if that house is going to be where you guys are going to have a Thanksgiving dinner again next year, if that was the plan, see if the invitation comes, see if they start to set up plans, like whichever family reaches out first, and everything goes fine, because, like, it could be a situation where they just need to cool off for, who knows, maybe a couple months, and then they just go right back to talking to each other. I don't know if it's a thing where they're always communicating and then now they're just not, because then that's a little bit more of a sign of concern. But if they don't really talk to each other and then they just see each other once a year for that Thanksgiving dinner, then it might be okay. So, like, you get mad at your boyfriend or girlfriend. You don't talk for like 2 days, and then all of a sudden you just, hey, I'm sorry too. You're right back to normal. So you never know. Like, you just need someone to speak out. And if both sides are kind of stubborn and they don't, or you're just like, you don't want to wait, you kind of have to be the mediator then at that point. And it is up to you to take some steps if you really want to get them to reconcile, get back on the same page. And I think it is most important in this situation that you don't take either side, no matter what happens. Like, you hear them both out individually, kind of. You can let them, I wouldn't let them know, but you can, like, initially, that you're talking to both sides, and just kind of get them to air it out to you, listen to them, and find a way to be supportive to whichever side that you're talking to, but objectively so, and point out, like, both mistakes, right? So, like, supporting them when they say, oh yeah, this other family, they said this thing and they really shouldn't have, but also you said this and you really shouldn't have. And just, like, being sort of a neutral third party to get them to both recognize their own mistakes, as well as, of the other party. It is much easier to recognize someone else's mistakes than that's I think that's where you should begin. And I would start with your own family. If you can do it in person. Obviously if you're not really with them often, then over the phone is fine. But in person makes it harder for people to yell, especially when you're kind of just trying to confront them in a way that you're trying to help. It makes it really hard for people to yell at you as just a third party messenger. And you just don't take sides. Like, don't try and overly support one or the other. And it almost appears as if you're anti both sides, if you know what I mean, to the people that you're talking to. So yeah, they might get a little emotional again, but it's don't let them get too far into it. But yeah, like religion can be a touchy subject, of course. A lot of people believe a lot of different things, and even like within Christianity, I think there's like 12 different segments. I don't know the exact number, but it's a lot, right? But just try and get them to open up to accepting that like not everyone needs to believe in the same thing if that's kind of the situation, like the disagreement that they have. But just like, they don't have to be in agreement on everything that they argued on. They just have to be able to accept the differences and move on, if that makes sense. So yeah, I mean, that's that. You just have to wait and see what happens, and hope for the best, and hope that time will heal most things. We'll see. All right, we'll go into the next topic. What makes somebody smart? So I see a lot of people say that a lot of other people are really smart, and I don't always necessarily agree. But that's because I don't see smart the way that a lot of people do. Like I think some people are like, oh, he can see really deeply, he can think really quickly, like he's a smart guy, whatever. But I think there's different kinds of smart, right? Like I separate smart into 3 different categories. So number 1 is your ability to process information and like how fast you can do it and how much you can process at once. Number 2 is your memory or your knowledge, your experience. And number 3 is your actual evaluation of the information that you've just processed and your ability to draw conclusions based on that, as well as your previous knowledge, your memory, and come to a good conclusion for whatever it is that you're thinking about. And I think that like those are the 3 main components of like what makes people smart. And not everyone's smart. I think very, very few people are smart in all 3 ways. There's a lot of people who are smart in 1 way, or maybe 2, but rarely 3. They do exist. Of course they do exist. But yeah, like, just talking about your number 1, your ability and speed in processing information. Like you need to be able to take in a lot of information quickly and process it efficiently, in order to be quote unquote smart. It's really just a measure of like, if you're, for example, learning, how much can you learn at once and how quickly can you learn it and process everything. So if someone's speaking super fast to you, like assuming that you understand every word that they said, of course that can be a separate topic. If you understand everything, then being able to keep up with that is a sign of like good processing speed when it comes to information. There's like many other examples. That's just one. But yeah, like, and then for memory, the more experience you have, the more knowledge you have. But knowledge isn't necessarily always correct. Like it's just a base of knowledge that you have to draw on to form conclusions based on your past experiences. But that doesn't mean all those past experiences are correct. It could give you the wrong idea. Like if you have a bad knowledge base, it could actually send you down the wrong path. But but experiences is one thing, right? And lastly, just your evaluation of information. So like what is important, what is actually relevant information, what is more relevant than something else? How do these certain factors maybe influence each other? So like you may have drawn a conclusion one way, but then you add another piece of information and it sends you a completely different direction because of how the 2 interact. And it's the ability to like form good conclusions based on, the other 2 basically. So yeah, I think smart is something that you can not necessarily like develop, but you can train. Like you're kind of born with the first 2, right? Or like 1 and 3. The ability to process information as well as your ability to analyze it, and then you just gain experience over time. But I think there is a way to kind of train your brain to kind of like open up to different possibilities, learning to recognize patterns within your knowledge, within the new information that comes up. And that may help a little bit to just be able to understand like the more intricate stuff that comes in. Like I'm mainly talking about like problem solving and things like that, but it applies universally, I think. So yeah, that's what I would say in terms of what actually makes somebody smart. It's not just a smart or dumb. I think there's a lot more that goes into it. All right. Last topic. Is it better to hold in your anger? So I think a good way to visualize anger is to see it as a sort of energy field. Like if you're holding in your anger, it can be detrimental for you and for your mental health because it's kind of stuck within you and you're not really letting it get out and it's just stuck inside doing its damage to you. But if you do release that anger, then you're releasing it to your surroundings, which could be detrimental to other people around you, to the structures and objects around you. When you like hit things, throw things, you yell at somebody, whatever, right? So like I think like, you know, destruction therapy exists for a reason. It's a good way to let things out. Let your anger out. But yeah, I think that there's no necessarily like good or bad or like better or worse when it comes to whether you want to hold in your anger or not. I would say though, it is generally advised to hold in your anger more often than not, mainly because of the ability for you to negatively impact the people around you, and that can exponentially grow the amount of negativity and anger within that room or within that like group of people or whatever. But if you can like somewhat control it, like I think that's more important, to control your anger rather than just you're always holding it in or you're always letting it out. Your ability to hold it in sometimes but let it out sometimes, and really just calculate how destructive are you going to be, you know, whether it's with your words or whether it's with your actions. Like if you just need to throw a pen across the room, I think that's fine as long as it's not towards a window. You know, you're probably going to be okay. But if you're going to throw a heavy object, you know, you're going to break something. Maybe that object, maybe your wall. So you have to be a little bit more careful when it comes to that. But yeah, like I think also the ability to control emotions can be a sign of maturity. That you're not as easy to manipulate or to mess with, in a sense that like people can't just push your buttons and make you rage and say something that you don't want to say. Like anger is a really easy way to do something you regret. Right. So, you know, some people may intentionally try and use that to get you to say or do things and then use it against you. So just keeping that in mind as well. But yeah, like, I think also ego plays a role in people's anger management. Like you always want a last laugh, you know, you always want the last laugh. Which means that you can escalate things. You can have unhealthy obsessions with things, because you always want to get them back in a sense. So, you know, I think learning to let go of your pride, learning to let go of anger is a really important skill to learn. It doesn't mean that you should like forgive or like just completely forget about it, but learning to like distract yourself, to minimize it and reduce the impact of like being having upsetting events or like being super angry. Learning to be able to kind of just subtly release the anger, not through throwing things or not through punching things, is a really important skill to learn, because you can kind of diffuse that anger within yourself by, you know, letting it out through just, I don't know, gaming, maybe go work out, or just kind of chill out, calm down. Again, doesn't mean you should forgive the person if it's because someone said something mean to you, but it just means you don't have this built up anger within you that is constantly at threat of boiling over. So yeah, but or like, you know, in sports, I think is another good example of like where people's anger might actually be a good thing to release, right? It's not always bad to release that anger. You don't want to yell at your teammates because that can be bad for the team's mentality. But if you let it out on the field, against the other team. Like you see some of these athletes, like, Tom Brady, Kobe Bryant, rest in peace, Michael Jordan, these people who you talk bad about them, you talk trash to them, and you just see this fire in their eyes, and they go out there and they rip you to shreds. So that kind of controlled release of anger can be a really good thing. It can help you lock in. It can help you really focus on what you need to do. So, it's not always a bad thing to release it. It's not always a bad thing to control or like to hold it in. But yeah, control is the most important element of that, is the ability to control your release of anger so that you're not just impulsively throwing something across the room and breaking $2,000 worth of whatever it is. So yeah. All right, that will do it for episode 10. I will see you guys next week. Thank you for listening.